In the NFL, every single team is doing their own thing. Some teams are rebuilding, some teams are contending for Super Bowls. But in today's video, I want to talk about 5 different teams that have a very underrated future regardless of what their position is. These are 5 teams that often don't get brought up in many conversations, so I want to shed some light on these teams with a little bit of a bright future. But without further ado, let's get started. And to start this video off, I want to talk about the Arizona Cardinals, because there's a lot to like about this Cardinals team, but there's also some things that definitely need to get fixed. For starters, with every team, the number one thing you're going to look at is their head coach and their quarterback, and I think Arizona has those. Jonathan Gannon has proven that he can take a very incomplete roster and make them a very competitive team. And with Kyler Murray as the quarterback, I think this team has a very bright future. Obviously, Kyler Murray is a very controversial quarterback, but I think when healthy, he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. I think if you look at his stats, they don't really tell the full story. He's never really had a great team around him, and when he has, he's done some pretty good things. This is his first time with, in my opinion, a very competent head coach, and I think moving forward, if they can build this roster up, Kyler Murray should be their future quarterback. And the number one thing that gives me the most hope about this roster moving forward, they have 2 first-round picks next year. And as of when I'm recording this video, those picks are likely going to be the 3rd overall pick and the 18th overall pick. Now, what should they spend those picks on? I think it depends on where the draft goes. I think you can probably pick up either an offensive lineman to add to their offensive line they took in last year's draft. They could even go weapon to get a guy like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a guy like Brock Bowers to add to this offense. Because if you add one of those 2 dynamic weapons to what is already a unit that has some pretty promising weapons, guys like Rondell Moore, Marquise Brown, Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, that can make that unit very deadly. And the nice thing about this offense, you already have James Conner, who's proving to be a very good running back, to go along with an improving offensive line led by guys like DJ Humphries and Paris Johnson Jr. The offensive line is something that definitely needs to add some work, mainly on the interior side of things. And then when you look on the defensive side of things, there's not a lot of big name guys there. Most of you guys probably know who Budda Baker is. Most of you guys probably know who a guy like Zaven Collins and BJ Ojulari are. But outside of that, I think 90% of people don't know who guys are like Dennis Gardeck or Chris Barnes or Josh Woods. But what I will say about these guys is that each one of those guys has their own special thing going on. And I think if they can get these guys healthy and get this defense going, it's not the worst defense in the NFL. What I will say is, it's probably one of the units that has maybe the least amount of talent in the NFL. And when I say talent, I mean like players with the upside of an all-pro level guy. Because unless I'm missing somebody, and I'm sure Cardinals fans will tell me, I don't think any of these guys have all-pro levels to them. So what makes me happy about this team is you have those 2 first-round picks. You also have a bunch of other draft picks to go along with that. I think if you address some of the problems along the defense and along the offensive line, this team has a very bright future. The next underrated future I want to talk about is going to be the Atlanta Falcons. Because despite the fact they might actually make the playoffs this year, nobody's really talking about how bright of a future this team actually has. You want to look at a team that is a head coach and quarterback away from being a dominant franchise? I think Atlanta represents that. Because if you look up and down this roster, you have a special running back, receiver, tight end combination to go along with one of the best offensive lines. And for the first time in a while, you actually have a defense that's pretty damn good. Is it a complete unit? No, I think they can definitely add some pieces to the linebacker and the defensive line room. But once they get healthy with guys like Grady Jarrett, this defense can be pretty special. I like the work they did in the secondary to get guys like Jesse Bates and Jeff Okudah. Again, this defense is not the best in the league, but I would argue it's top 15. The one concern I do have about this Falcons team, Desmond Ridder and Arthur Smith. And my concern is that if Arthur Smith makes the playoffs, he's probably going to keep his job. And while I think Arthur Smith is a decent head coach, my big concern with him is he just doesn't use his weapons. And I'm not trying to create a new narrative about this Atlanta Falcons team. I'm just kind of stating the obvious. When you have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and you're not using them to their full maximum potential, what are you doing? When you have a massive human being in Kyle Pitts who has elite talent and elite special playmaking ability, and you give guys like Jonnu Smith and McCole Pruitt playing time, like what are we saying? And of all the teams I'm going to talk about in this video, the Atlanta Falcons have an extremely young team. Their average age is only 25 years and 9 months. And if you can add either a veteran quarterback in, let's say, Kirk Cousins, or if you want to go the youth route and take a quarterback in this year's draft, I think this team has a bright future. I'm going to give you guys 3 quarterbacks who I think are realistic options for this team moving forward. Number 1, Kirk Cousins. Number 2, Bo Nix. Number 3, Michael Penix Jr. You put any of those quarterbacks in this offense with a potentially new head coach, I would love that for this Atlanta Falcons team. Now, coming into this year, I did predict the Atlanta Falcons to win their division, and it's looking like that might be the case, but they aren't going to do anything in the playoffs. I think once you get that new head coach and that new quarterback, the sky is the limit for the Atlanta Falcons. The next team I want to talk about is going to be the Tennessee Titans, a team that I feel like nobody's really been mentioning this year. And the main reason why? they're not winning a lot of games. And this is also a team that has a bunch of older players, guys like Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins. Those are your two main stars who are on the opposite side of where you want them to be. But what this team does have is a great head coach, a young rookie quarterback who's shown potential, some young players here and there along the offense like Treylon Burks and Tyjae Spears, not to mention an offensive line that is getting better, led by guys like Peter Skoronski, and arguably a top 10 defense. Yes, the defense is a bit on the older side, but they are a really good unit, and especially if you add a couple pieces here and there, it can be a very special unit. So how does this team take the next step? Well, I think it's just effectively adding pieces here and there. The number one thing I'm doing is, of course, addressing the offensive line some more. The offensive line is arguably one of the biggest downfalls of this Tennessee Titans team, and I think as time goes on, it's going to get better and better. And I think defensively, as long as you continue to draft well and pick up nice additions on the defense and free agency, you should be fine. But the biggest question that this team is going to have to face: how good can Will Levis be? And can this team maximize his potential to become one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL? And if they can reach that potential with Will Levis, who knows where this team can go? The only tough part about this team is your division's kind of getting better. Houston's getting better, Jacksonville's getting better, the rest of the division's getting better. Could be interesting. There's not a whole lot to really talk about with this Titans team. They kind of are what they are right now, and their future, at least in the immediate future, isn't very bright. But in their long-term future, with Will Levis progressing and the offensive line getting better, I like it. But now let's move on to one of the biggest surprises of this current season, the Indianapolis Colts. Because despite their rookie sensational quarterback in Anthony Richardson going on IR and Jonathan Taylor missing half the season, they currently sit at 7-5 and second in the division and have a legit chance to make the playoffs. And there's a lot of praise to go around on this team. For starters, give some credit to Gardner Minshew. He's running that Shane Steichen offense really well right now. You also have to give credit to Michael Pittman Jr., who's having a very good year this year. Also give credit to Zach Moss and Trey Sermon for stepping up when Jonathan Taylor goes down. The offensive line is looking a lot better. And defensively, this is arguably one of the better units in the NFL. Sure, here and there they're a little inconsistent, but they've held some pretty good teams to a pretty low amount of points. And when this team gets a fully healthy Anthony Richardson, I'm sorry, I think this team could be very freaking good. Because when Anthony Richardson is healthy and playing at his best, he's one of the best quarterbacks of this rookie class. It's hard to really see where he progresses from here and just how good of a down the field thrower he can be. But with his freakish athleticism to go along with his really impressive arm talent, I'm looking at a guy who has the potential of a Jalen Hurts. And it just so happens his offensive coordinator is Shane Steichen, the old offensive coordinator for Jalen Hurts. So if there is a guy who knows how to maximize the potential of Anthony Richardson, they have the guy. And I was screaming through the roof when they drafted for Anthony Richardson. I was so happy for this team because I actually like the Colts. They're not my favorite team in the world, but I generally like their culture and who they are and what they represent. And when they were able to attach Anthony Richardson with Shane Steichen, I was very impressed with their offseason. I'll even go on a little bit of a limb here, and this is completely off topic, but I think if Sam Ehlinger, their third string quarterback with a healthy Anthony Richardson at least, I think Sam Ehlinger could actually be a decent quarterback under Shane Steichen. Because the one thing that he does struggle with is just decision making and sometimes accuracy. But I think if you make his life easy like a Shane Steichen can do, I think Sam Ehlinger could actually be a pretty decent quarterback. That was completely off topic. I know that I was just kind of throwing that out there. But you look up and down this roster, there's some young guys, some experienced guys, and a whole lot of really talented players who have such bright futures. You look on this defense, there isn't necessarily a glaring need anywhere. The linebacking core is getting better, especially after some of the guys have left, but I do think that ultimately they might need to add one or two pieces here and there. Adding an edge rusher who can just be a disruptor would also be very nice as well. And maybe adding a second quarter next to a guy like Kenny Moore might be the move as well. But that's the thing, this team is not contending for a Super Bowl. They're going to have the offseason, they're going to have a draft to address any big needs they might have. But with Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen leading the way, I absolutely love where this team is going. But lastly, let's talk about the last team in this list, and it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I'll be 100% abundantly clear. I don't love the Pittsburgh Steelers. And my main reason why, I don't really love the way they play offense, and I definitely don't like Kenny Pickett. That's not me bashing on Pickett and saying that he can't be a good quarterback in the NFL, but based off what I've seen, it's been unimpressive, let's just put it that way. But the Pittsburgh Steelers have something that a lot of teams don't have, a very, very good combination of young players who are playing big games to go along with veteran guys who can teach young players. The only teams that are actually able to do stuff like that are really good teams, and I think the Pittsburgh Steelers can be a really good team. Now, the real question is, how do you get to that point, and how do you get from being this meddling team that might make the playoffs and becoming a first-round bounce to actually being a legitimate contender? And I think it's going to take a super long offseason to just address the offense. Because if you look at the defense, that is a Super Bowl caliber defense. Led by TJ Watt, that defense has some young guys and some older guys who are playing at super high levels right now. The big question is, can you find a quarterback and an offensive coordinator who know how to scheme up plays to give guys opportunities to make plays? My concern is that this team might have a chance to make the playoffs and they'll just run it back with the same guys and it won't go nowhere. Will the Steelers actually move on from Kenny Pickett? I kind of have my doubts. Do I think they should? 100%. I'm sorry, but if you give a guy like a Jaden Daniels or a Michael Penix Jr. or a Bo Nix a chance to play football with guys they have on this team, it could be freaking good. To me, nothing that Kenny Pickett has done has shown the potential of what you want him to be. Does he have the potential of a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr. or a Jaden Daniels? I don't think so. And listen, I actually liked Kenny Pickett out of college. I thought he was worth a first or second round pick. But sometimes you have to realize he might just be a bust. Now, I don't want to throw the bust term on him already because I think there's some circumstances that have been holding him back. So you might be asking, well, why is this team on this list? Well, I think they have an underrated future. They have a good defense. They have a decent developing offensive line. They have Mike Tomlin. They have a run game. You need a quarterback, and you need some new schemes offensively. I think if you do those things, this team can be a really good team. I'm just going to throw this name out there, but if you put Jaden Daniels in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, that offense is going to fly, baby. But those are 5 teams who I think have bright futures. Let me know in the comment section below if you guys agree or disagree. And of course, if you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button because it helps me out a ton. But I love you guys. Peace.